Sometimes you may not want to source from China or take something that already exists and kind of twist it and make it your own. Maybe you have your own idea for something you want to create from scratch, but you don't know how to do it. Like, how do I get this manufactured? What's the process of finding the right factory to do it, and making sure getting the designs right and the whole process. And that's why I've invited my friend Zach Leonard on to speak to you in this module. He's going to be talking about how you can actually create a product from scratch. And his company, Gemba, specializes in helping people that have an idea and having that idea developed all the way into a final finished product that's on the market on Amazon. So he's going to be giving you some cool insight and tips on how that process works. So I hope you really enjoyed this module.
Hi, Freedom Ticket viewers. My name is Zach Leonard, and I am the founder and COO of a company called Gemba. And today, I'm going to be teaching you on how the process works for creating unique products versus going down the traditional route of white labeling, in hopes that you can learn how to create awesome products that sell for 7 figures or above, that are defensible and that have a moat built around them so that you can compete successfully on Amazon. And so today, I'm going to give you a deep dive based on my expertise of creating over 500 different products, all of them pretty custom, that have sold for over 7 figures, that I'm going to expose some secret sauce of what we do at Gemba to show you how to create a defensible and unique product that's actually going to sell. So, as I mentioned in my module, we're going to go through the steps of how to create a unique product. The first step is product research. You can do this on tools like Helium 10 or have your own spreadsheet to look at how to actually validate and make sure that a product is going to sell. This is a very important step, and it's going to save you a ton of money in the long run if you can actually do this really well. The second thing is assembling your development team. I'm going to explain to you the differences in types of team you're going to want to assemble based on the types of product that you're actually selling. Each different type of product needs different people and expertise in order for you to get them out in the market. I'm going to explain what that looks like. The third step is to create the product collateral. Based on that type of product that you're going to be making, there's different collateral that actually gets exposed to the factory. And so I'm going to explain that in step 3. In step 4, we're going to talk about the difference between finding a factory on places like Alibaba versus doing it for unique products. There's a different process you're going to want to take in different things, some similar things you want to take a look at, but also some different things to make sure that you can validate that that partner factory is a really good partner for you. The 5th step is to look at the sampling process and explain what the difference is between going down the white labeling path versus creating your own product, and how time and money is going to be different for those 2 different types of paths. Finally, getting into production ramp, and quality control, and the importance of making sure that you have a quality control and measure in place. And finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about is testing and compliance. The final step before you release your product into the wild and go sell it in different places like United States or Europe or Mexico, or wherever you're going to go sell it. Let's dive in. So before we get into the steps, let's talk about product design and why it's so important. I always equate this to building a house. So if you are building a house, if you went up to a house builder and said, I want to build a house with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a pool, go. How do you think the house builder is going to interpret that information? Probably a lot different than you expect your house to look. It's the same thing if you go to a factory and tell them, I want to make X product, go. The factory is going to take their interpretation of what you're saying and create some sort of product that is probably nothing like what you want to have out of your final product. And the reason for that is the factory or the house builder is going to try and make it for as cheap as possible and not take into consideration what you want or what your customers want. And so that is really why the design process is so important, because you're able to take that information based on the research you've done, based on the quantitative and qualitative factors that you've established, and actually start down the process of creating the product and establish all those details while you go down that process. So you have complete control as the product owner to dictate what the final product is going to look like, what colors it's going to have, how big each component goes into it, the types of components that go into it. All of that's established in the product design phase. It's going to also save you a ton of time in the sampling phase. and other production ramp phases, because you don't have to go back and forth with the factory so much, just going and saying, well, I want to take this product and make one slight tweak, and can you add blue here and red here and do all these different things. There's millions of different types of shades of blue and shades of red. In the product design phase, you establish every single detail throughout that product to make sure that the factory can understand and interpret exactly what you want. So it's going to save you a ton of time by establishing those details earlier on in the process versus going directly to the factory and trying to establish them on the fly as you go down that development cycle. It turns your concepts and your ideas into actual reality and puts them on paper, and then you can start testing that with things like prototypes and 3D prints and stuff like that. It allows you to also build a collection and a brand. This is the foundation for product collateral, which boosts also the value of your business. And so if you're looking at eventually exiting a business or selling a product for a long period of time that has defensibility, you can use that collateral and that information that you've established in the product design phase to go get things like patents and make sure that your product is actually defended against competition. So it's going to boost the value of your business. And that's what the companies that are aggregators or the companies that are private equity or individual operators that are looking to buy businesses, they're looking for defensible products that have little competition that can sell and scale really fast. And so that is all established. All those details, all those collateral, all those defensibility is established during the product design phase, which is why I'm stressing the importance to you at the beginning of this module as you go down the journey of creating your own product. Now that I've explained that, let's dive into the actual nuts and bolts of what it takes to create a defensible product. So as I mentioned, the first step in the process is product research. You have to make sure your product is a winner before you go out and spend all the money on developing it and manufacturing it and warehousing it and everything it takes to actually get it out there in the market. So there are two types of product research that we really stress here again, but the first one is quantitative and the second one is qualitative. And I'm going to go into an example of both of those real quickly. So quantitative, there are great tools out there. Helium 10 is one of them that can help you find different products and find different categories and find different keywords and pricing and all the things you need to do to make sure you have a really, really successful launch to your product and continue to sustain that revenue as you continue to scale your operations. There are some things that I wanted to hone in on, which are pricing distribution and pricing pressure that may not be as intuitive, and things that we look at to help make sure that we have a winner, not only on the data side of it, but also as a sustained winner throughout the history of the product being launched. So let's dissect this into the example of a massage gun. So pricing distribution are what are the mean and quartiles above and below the median that are going to have the number of that are going to show the average number of what it should be from a pricing perspective. So what I mean by that is, let's say your average price is $100. If you want to see if how many products are within 95% of that set of $100 mark, that's one standard distribution away from the average or the median. And so if 95% of the products are being sold between $125 and $75, you're going to want your product to be priced somewhere in that to be competitive on the market. Pricing pressure is another thing that you're going to want to measure, which is how much is the price moving over the past X amount of time. So again, let's look at the average price of massage gun over the past couple of years. When it was launched in the last couple of years, the revenue was on average somewhere around $200, and the cost of goods sold was around $50. So your gross margins were $75, which is really healthy. However, this year, the pricing average of a massage gun is somewhere around $100, while the cost of goods sold has not moved much. And so your gross margins have declined to 50%, which is not as healthy. So why does this matter? Well, COGS and margins need to be in line in order for the product to make sense. And so if the product looks like it's a winner, but you can't get your cost of goods sold and your margin in order, then you're not going to want to launch the product because you're not going to get enough revenue into your business. And so you need to figure out what you're comfortable with as a seller in order for you to go down the path for revenue and margin perspective, to make sure that it's worth investing more time past the product research phase, past the quantitative product research phase, in order for you to move on to the qualitative product research phase. So again, if you can make sure that your pricing is in order and that you're going to have great margins, it's worth continuing the conversation. If it's not, and it's not within the boundaries of what your business can absorb, then you should stop here and move on to the next product, the next keyword for you to research. So after you've looked at the quantitative side of things and things like pricing pressure and pricing distribution, the next thing are qualitative measures. And there are easy things you can do to make sure that your product is in line from a qualitative perspective. So there's a couple ways that we do it, which is first looking at reviews. There's a lot of feedback, a lot of things that people are saying about your product or complementary products or products that you're researching that can help you create those slight incremental innovations or slight uniqueness to your product that's going to help you on that path of product development. And so if you look at the reviews on Amazon, you can look at the low star reviews, you can look at the high star reviews and start formulating, okay, what are people saying in order for me to go down the path of making a different product or making an enhancement to a product. You can also use websites like Etsy and Pinterest to see what small batch and small quantity manufacturers or small quantity sellers are using for trends. So if they're starting to use wood instead of ceramic on things like cake stands, or if you're using gold instead of red on all of their figurines and all of their toys, right? You can start to formulate and see based on the qualitative trends on what you should create from your product and what type of colors you should use and what type of source material you should use. And so all those things go into the qualitative side of the equation. So next, once you've gotten through the qualitative and quantitative research, you're going to want to assemble your team from a development standpoint. And there are three different main types of product categories that I want to cover and help guide you on the path of assembling a team. And so the first type of product category is cut and sew. And examples of these are apparel or bags or soft goods, things that you literally cut the fabric and then sew it together. The team that you're going to need for that is just an industrial designer. An industrial designer, you need to make sure that they have actual experience developing products that are similar to the ones that you have. And so if you go on, places like Upwork or other things like that, those are the types of questions you should be asking and find out if they've actually made products in mass manufacturing. The collateral output, the thing that you're going to want to actually see the product development team assemble, is what we call a tech pack. And I'll explain that in the next couple of slides and what that looks like. The next type of product category that is really important for you to understand is injection molded products, things like plastics, metals, and glass. Those types of products require much more technical skill because they have to create a mold in order for them to do that. So on top of an industrial designer to give you more of the feasibility or to give you more of the actual look and feel of the product, you're going to actually want to add on to that a mechanical engineer, someone who is technical and can show you the dimensions on things and make sure that the mold is engineered correctly by the factory in order for the product to do exactly what you want it to do from a functionality standpoint, as well as how it's going to look and feel. And so the collateral output for an injection molded team or injection molded product is a 2D and 3D CAD drawing. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. And then finally, another more intense version of a product are electronics. These are lights, phones, TVs, anything that you plug in, anything that uses wiring and PCBs and stuff like that. The team you're going to need is going to add on to that injection molded team. You're going to probably need an industrial designer, a mechanical engineer, and at the very minimum, an electrical engineer. The electrical engineer is the one who can actually make sure that the buttons work correctly and make sure that the lights work correctly and make sure that all the things that are happening from the electronics perspective are doing so correctly. If you have a product that also has software, you're going to make sure that you want to have a software engineer on the team. So again, as you start to get more complicated with the product, the team needs to grow. And as the team grows, it gets more complex for you to actually go and create this product. So if you want to create something that's a little bit easier, start off with a cut and sew product and then just get that team assembled. If you want to go for much more defensible product or much more intense product, so a product that's probably going to take a little bit harder for development, but also may yield you much more reward on the back end from a revenue standpoint, you probably can go down the route of creating electronics. And for that, the collateral output is going to be 2D, 3D CAD drawing, and also a bill of materials. And the bill of materials is going to specify how much of each individual component goes into the final product. And so what does that look like? So let's start with a collateral output of cut and sew. This is a tech pack. If you can look at my screen here, you can see that all of the material and all of the dimensions and all of the different call outs for everything is very specified on Modic. This is what they call this a tech pack. And so this tech pack is going to call out the color, the exact Pantone color. So you can see up here, the Pantone color is being called out. Same thing with under in the lapel, under the lapel and where the buttons are, that also is being called out here. And this printing right here, this stitching right here, that color is also being called out right here. All of those are telling the factory exactly what color needs to be made and exactly what material it is on. And if you look at on the right side, this is showing the dimensions of each different part of the shirt that's being created. So you're looking at, the pocket, how big is the pocket? You're looking at how big on the back end this strip is right here that has a button on it. You're looking at what kind of button, what size the button it is. All of those technical details need to be flushed out in the development phase before you go and talk to the factory, because it's going to limit the amount of time that you have in the sampling process, and it's going to give you less iterations, less money, less time throughout that process as well. Moving on to injection molded products. This is a 2D and 3D CAD drawing, a very rudimentary version of it. So what does this tell our factory? It tells them the exact specification of how to make that mold for the final product. And so if you look at what this product is, it's a metal widget. This product has specific parameters and specific callouts for each different little shape and nook and cranny that goes into the final product. And so it's calling out the dimension for, the top, the bottom, everything in between here. It's calling out the type of metal that's being used in this widget. It's calling out the different type of functionality that this widget's going to have. All of that technical detail that an engineer creates is right here. And that is exactly how the factory is going to interpret that information and then tell you if it's feasible or not, and maybe make suggestions as a part of that process. And finally, adding on top of that collateral that you've seen for the less complicated products, we're going into the bill of materials for an AirPod, for example. And so each one of these different parts is being called out, how many goes into the final product, where you can find them, the vendor, what's the MOQ from that vendor, and the unit cost. So all of those things are predetermined during the actual development phase, because all of these different components that go into the actual AirPod are out there in the wild, or they are now. Maybe when they developed them, they weren't. But now that they're out there in the wild, those things are known entities. They're known exact quantities and pricing that goes into the final product. So you can understand how much it's going to cost you at different unit volume measures, so that you can go to the factory and say, well, at this, I found it for this much dollars at one factory. This is how much it's going to cost for the entire component, the entire final product from an electronic standpoint. Not adding, that's just the bill of materials. Once the factory gets into the actual labor it takes for them to do that, that's how you come up with the final price. So when you go down the path of finding a factory that is for a unique product, there are things that you can do remotely, and there are things you can do in person. I've been to countless factories where I've looked at what they have remotely, and they have a bunch of audit records, and they have standards and everything that you want to have in place for a good partner. But then when you go there in person, it's nothing what it looks like on paper. I've been to a factory where, they said they've been creating toys for Walmart and Disney, and I show up and there's cobwebs on all their machines, and no one's in the factory working. And the products that they have look like they're from the 1980s. So again, it's really important that when you go down the path of unique products, that you're looking at what the actual factories are, both remotely and in person. And so remotely, you're looking for things like audit records, ISO standards, export reports. If they have similar customers and products to you, you should get that information. The capacity of the factory, how many products they can make per month. So as you scale, you'll know when you may outgrow that factory. You're going to want to look into their legal history. Have they been sued before? Have they had any Chinese records or Vietnamese records of legal problems? And finally, you're going to want to have an NNN in place for a custom product, because this is something that they could go out and copy. And an end-to-end agreement stands for a non-disclosure, non-circumvent, and non-compete. It's basically the Chinese version of an NDA. In other countries like India or Vietnam, an NDA may suffice. For when you go through an in-person audit or an in-person meeting with the factory, there's some things that you're actually going to want to look for and absorb as you make your decision of why you want to go down the path of creating this product with the factory partner. And so you're looking at, are there machines on and their staff working? Are there similar products being made? You want to make sure that they're not using, child labor, that they're age appropriate, that they're professional. Are they wearing, unique clothes? Are they wearing a standard clothing assembly line, or are they, kind of showing up in street clothes? Are their staff sophisticated? Do they have engineers on staff? How do they manage their quality control process? Do they have specific people, or are they just hoping that someone comes in and does it from an outsourced place? And then you can also ask, you can look at where they're getting the source materials for. If you can go into their, if you look at the factory and you can go into the material warehouse or wherever they have all their raw materials come in, look at where they're getting them from. Is it from Korea? Is it from other mainland China? Is it from Vietnam? Is it from India? Are they using good materials? Are they dumping things into the river? What are they doing from a cleanliness standpoint? So all those things that you can't really do remotely are the things that you're going to want to actually look for when you go to find this factory in person. And so I want to give you an example of an observation that I made when I went to a factory in Vietnam, which was the largest bag manufacturer. And so if you look at this picture, you can see that this is a pretty large factory. As I said, it's the largest one. They have multiple warehouses like this on this campus where they house 10,000 workers to do this. As you can see, their standard of work is very high. You can see that everyone's wearing a different colored shirt based on who they are in the assembly line. And so the blue shirt is for a line worker or someone that actually does the stitching. And then you have this person walking around in a red vest that's making sure that they are doing their quality control. And so they have a quality assurance manager that's going around and making sure everything's okay. And so these are the things that you want to, examples of things that you want to observe when you actually go to the factory yourselves or send someone on your behalf to go to the factory. Have them take pictures and photos and videos and make sure that they actually are who they say they are. They're working on products that are similar to the ones that you want to create, and that they have some sort of QC or QA process in-house in place. Otherwise, just know that you're going to have to take care of that yourself. So once you've found that factory, you can move into the sampling process. And with the sampling process, I'm going to explain the difference between going down the path of white label versus creating your own unique product. So with white label, because the molds and tools have already been developed, the price is actually already set by the factory. So it's just for them, it's scaling up based on the MOQs that you have. Same thing with the price of the actual sample itself. They've made it before, so they know exactly how much it costs. And because of this, they can turn around these samples very quickly, maybe within a few days. And they may even allow some minor changes, colors, packaging, those types of minor changes that you can make. So when you do that for a white label product, there is no real expectation that the price is going to change unless you're making some holistic changes to the product, or that the price of the actual final product is going to change. That's completely different from when you go down the path of a unique product. The factory still needs to develop the molds and tools and iterate on those until you come to the final sample or the golden sample. So the price is actually iterative, both from the actual price of the sample and the price of the final product until the final sample is actually approved. Expect that it's going to take longer and more iterations. So it should take probably between 2 and 4 iterations or 2 to 3 iterations before the final sample is approved, pending no holistic changes. However, you can make those changes because it is an iterative process with the factory. You can make major changes to the product before you go down the path of mass manufacturing. You can't really do that with white label products because those products have already been developed. And so you can expect that it's going to take a lot more time. It could be more expensive, but if you get that defensible and unique product out and pass the sampling process, you're well on your way to getting those large revenue figures and having a defensible product. So you've gone through the sampling process, you're into the production ramp and into mass production. You want to make sure that you have quality control measures in place. And this is whether you're doing unique products or white label products. So the value is that you're going to be able to avoid quality fade and keep the factory honest. For places like Amazon, the rankings are actually dictated by the ratings. So the higher your product is rated, the higher the product is going to be ranked on the actual search term in the category. Think about all the time you have to spend reviewing bad ratings and how much stress it causes on you, right? The time is money. And I've had customers that are in the Amazon space that have told me they've done research that shows that every low star that they get is worth at least $500 to their business. And so for that amount of money, you can actually go get a quality control inspection to make sure your product, especially if it's new or unique, make sure that you have that sense of that you have that quality control inspection done. And so you have that sense of relief, or you have that kind of eyes and ears on the ground actually where you are in doing manufacturing. So some quick tips on what you should look for. You should set up an AQL standard with whoever you're doing an inspection with. So that is acceptable quality limitation. It's going to be depending on the number of products you're developing in that production run and the type of product that you're working with. And so different products have different standards. You're going to make sure that you set those up ahead of time to hand to your inspector. You're also going to want photo and video evidence of these. And then finally, you might want to have a difference between scheduling them in advance or just showing up at random to keep your factory honest. So those are things that are really, really critical, especially when you're developing a new product, because this hasn't been done before. So you want to make sure that in mass production, it's not just what it looks like in the sampling process, but you're going through that production ramp where you have hundreds and then thousands of products being mass produced, and then checking them all along the way via those AQL standards. Finally, compliance is a huge thing. Compliance in a white label versus unique products is similar, but it's a little bit different because it's the first time it's going out in the wild. So for both a white label and unique product, the importer of record is liable for product safety. For both white label and unique products, product safety is most likely required and done by someone. The difference is for a white label product, it's probably has already been completed by the factory or the previous customer. But you're going to want to make sure that that's correct. So you want to get those product safety compliance documentation sent to you by your factory. For a unique product, it's most likely it's required before you enter the country that you're actually going to sell the product in. And so it's going to be done by you as the importer of record. So what does that look like? Or what are the things you need to look out for on compliance? First, there's product standards. So what kind of product is it? Is it a kid's product? Is it an infant product? Is it electronics? Those type of products have different compliance measures and different testing measures that you're going to actually need to go through in order for you to get it compliant for wherever you're going to sell that product. Each different country you sell the product in also has different compliance considerations you need to take into account. So that's the first thing you need to look at. What type of product is it, and what type of standards do they fall under based on the type of product it is? The second thing is substance regulations. So there are substances that are harmful to humans, like lead, mercury, and phthalates, that cannot be in any product that you sell. And so you're going to want to get your product tested for those things and make sure that they are not in your final product. Same thing with labeling requirements. Every product that's imported needs to have the country of origin, and then kids and infants product have different tracking label information that needs to be on the label. And then electronics also need to have different information that needs to be on the label and tested. So all the labeling requirements need to be taken into consideration before you start going through selling it into the country that you're going to sell your product in. There are also other documentation requirements like your GCC or certificate of compliance for kids products. Those things need to be documented and made sure you have that before you sell that product. And then finally, product safety testing requirements. So each different product, depending on type it is, has a different set of testing requirements that they need to go through. All those are determined by the things I mentioned earlier, which are the standards, the substances, and the labels. Those all need to be tested by a third-party Consumer Product Safety Commission certified lab. And here are a few of them for your reference. CHIMA, Bureau Veritas, SGS, and Intertek. All of them are third-party Consumer Product Safety Commission certified, and so they are highly accurate and highly regarded and certified in order for them to get through customs. So these compliance considerations are needed for both white label and unique products. The difference is if it's a unique product and it's the first time you're putting that product into the market, the product hasn't been certified or tested yet. So all those things need to be done by you before we go into the actual mass manufacturing. So that is the process that it takes for you to get a new product out in the market. You've learned what product research is and some things you need to look out for on top of the great tool like Helium 10 that you can use to actually validate that your hunch or your ideas are valid and that they can create that seven-figure product that you've always dreamed of. You've learned about the different types of assembly you need to have for a development team, whether it's on a cut and sew product, injection molded product, or a electronics product. And what that collateral looks like, the output you should expect based on the type of team and the type of product you've assembled. You've learned about what finding a factory looks like for a white label product versus unique product, and why Alibaba is not the best avenue for you to look for a factory for a unique product. You've learned what the difference between white labeling and unique products are from a sampling perspective. It's going to take a little bit longer for a unique product and maybe a little bit more expensive, but again, you're going to have a result of a defensible product as a result as the output of the sampling process. And finally, you've learned about production and quality control, the importance of not skimping on that, and what testing compliance looks like for your product before you release it into the wild. I hope that this has been helpful for you and that you're going to be able to take this module, what you've learned, and go create that seven-figure product for yourself.